We are just minutes away to our weekend. Slow start to our weekend because Benito Baeza and I will be passing out candy tomorrow. Of course, we do this every year. Well, it'll be my first year. We're doing that, of course, up by Fred Meyer, and we'll be joined as well by many of our coworkers and some members of the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Department. And we'll see a lot of you that way. I love Halloween just because I love the look, the smiles on the faces of the children when they're coming along and they see this huge trove of candy. I have very few recollections of going out and actually doing that myself anymore. So it's great to look at other people doing that. On a happier note, let's close down this show perhaps as a Friday morning and leave you on a couple of happier notes than perhaps what we've discussed this morning. I do believe that the show I put together today, and I don't know why, could actually end up in the Museum of Broadcasting. We'll have to see about that. It's 9:55. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. 46, and God willing, and the creek don't rise, I get to do this all over again on Monday morning between 8 and 10 o'clock. And Rush Limbaugh is coming up following Fox News in just a few minutes. And Sean Hannity at 1, Glenn Beck at 4 o'clock today. I came across this, and it put a smile on my face today. We have a caller who hails from down under, occasional caller. And if I had a list of countries that I'd like to live in if I couldn't live in the United States, I think Australia would be the next country I would prefer to live in. Maybe New Zealand, Canada, and Scotland, Ireland, England. In other words, where I can generally understand the language. Generally being the point here. This is from the Daily Caller. Headline, Chronically Drunk First Settlers Caused Aussie Accent. An Australian professor is crediting heavy and habitual use of alcohol by colonial settlers for the development of the awesome Aussie accent. Dean Frankel, a professor of public speaking and communications at Victoria University in Melbourne, makes the argument in The Age. The Australian alphabet cocktail was spiked by alcohol, Frankel writes in the piece from earlier this week. Our forefathers regularly got drunk together and through their frequent interactions unknowingly added an alcoholic slur to our national speech patterns. For the past 2 centuries, from generation to generation, drunken Aussie speak continues to be taught by sober parents to their children. The professor also credits a solid dollop of culture clash for the way that Australians speak English. The Australian dialect blends the way English people, Irish people, German people, and Aboriginal people, he said, spoke to each other back in the day when they were good and wasted. I read a book a number of years ago called The Great Shame. The author of that book also wrote Schindler's List. It's a phenomenal book, and that it details how many of these early settlers, we hear it was a nation of convicts. Well, yeah, but they weren't necessarily cutthroats. What would happen? In fact, The Great Shame details how a fellow whose family was starving during a famine in Ireland, he stole a loaf of bread. So the English just slapped him into irons, put him on a ship, and sent him to Australia. And as his family was starving back in Ireland, there was nobody left to provide for them. So he ended up in Australia with no hopes other than to settle down and move in with a girl who'd been dropped off there too, apparently for some trumped-up charge, and ended up fathering a long line of people who still live there today. So the origins of the country are very sad. But then everything we know about Australia, I suppose it's Paul Hogan. It's fueled by Paul Hogan, his Crocodile Dundee character. Every time you think of Australia, I think it puts a smile on people's faces, which is a big turnaround from when I was a kid and we were stuck with watching Skippy the Bush Kangaroo or listening to Rolf Harris with his do didgeridoos and all of the like. 9:58, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. As I mentioned, Rush Limbaugh next. I hope everyone has a great weekend. Remember, Sunday morning, fall back with those alarm clocks.